Most conflicts do not begin because resources are scarce. They begin because perception is. When something is limited, attention, status, opportunity, or even something as simple as space, humans instinctively shift into a competitive mindset. The mind quietly reframes the situation into a zero-sum game. If one gains, another must lose. This shift rarely happens consciously. It emerges from a deeper psychological layer designed for survival, not for harmony. In small groups, this pattern becomes especially visible. A shared resource, like a river, a project, or even recognition within a team, slowly transforms from something neutral into something symbolic. It begins to represent control, fairness, and identity. People are no longer reacting to the resource itself, but to what it means. In everyday life, this can be observed in workplaces. Two colleagues are assigned to collaborate, but both want ownership of the final outcome. Initially, the tension is subtle: slight interruptions, passive disagreements, and unwillingness to fully share information. Over time, the focus shifts. The goal is no longer to complete the task effectively, but to ensure that the other does not gain more credit. Nothing about the situation objectively requires conflict. The tension is psychological. This happens because the human brain is highly sensitive to perceived inequality, not actual inequality, but perceived imbalance. Even when resources are sufficient, the feeling that someone else might be getting more triggers discomfort. This discomfort is often interpreted as injustice, even when no real injustice exists. The mind prefers a clear structure. Fairness must look equal. But in reality, fairness is rarely equal. It is contextual. And the inability to tolerate this ambiguity creates friction. When groups fail to recognize this pattern, they begin to argue over distribution instead of understanding. Each individual becomes more focused on protecting their share than on sustaining the system that provides the share in the first place. This is where cooperation breaks down. A shared system, whether it is a river in a village or a collaborative environment in modern life, only functions when individuals think beyond immediate gain. But the default human tendency is short-term optimization. The brain prioritizes what can be secured now over what can be sustained later. This is not irrational, it is ancient. However, in structured societies, this instinct often creates unnecessary conflict. People defend positions that do not need defending. They compete where cooperation would produce more value. And most importantly, they fail to recognize that the system itself is fragile. Once the system weakens, everyone loses. A common social example appears in friendships or small social circles. When attention becomes uneven, when one person is perceived to be closer to another, subtle tension emerges. Conversations change tone. Silence becomes heavier. Small actions are overinterpreted. The resource in this case is not physical, it is emotional attention. Yet the psychological mechanism is identical. Humans are not just reacting to reality, they are reacting to interpretations of reality. And these interpretations are heavily influenced by comparison. Comparison is the silent amplifier of conflict. Without comparison, most situations remain neutral. But once individuals begin measuring what others have relative to themselves, dissatisfaction emerges. This dissatisfaction does not require logic, it only requires awareness of difference. And once dissatisfaction appears, the mind begins searching for justification. This is where narratives form. People rarely say, "I feel threatened by imbalance." Instead, they construct rational explanations. This is unfair. This should not be allowed. Something needs to change. These statements feel logical, but they are often rooted in emotional perception rather than objective reality. Over time, these narratives solidify. They become beliefs. and beliefs are difficult to challenge, especially when they are tied to identity. At this stage, cooperation becomes almost impossible. Each side believes it is defending something legitimate. The original resource is no longer the focus. The conflict becomes self-sustaining. This explains why many disputes escalate far beyond their initial cause. However, there is another layer to this pattern. Cooperation is not just a moral choice, it is a cognitive shift. It requires individuals to move from a scarcity mindset to a systems mindset. Instead of asking, "What am I getting?" the question becomes, "What maintains the system that benefits everyone?" This shift is subtle but powerful. In environments where this mindset is present, behavior changes naturally. People become less reactive to small imbalances. They tolerate temporary inequality because they trust the stability of the system. They focus less on immediate distribution and more on long-term sustainability. This does not eliminate conflict entirely, but it reduces unnecessary conflict. Because most conflicts are not about survival, they are about interpretation. Understanding this changes how social dynamics are perceived. Tension in groups no longer appears random or personal. It becomes predictable. It follows patterns. It can be observed without immediate judgment. One begins to notice how quickly people shift into defensive thinking when something feels limited, how easily cooperation dissolves when comparison intensifies, and how often conflict could be avoided if perception were adjusted early. This awareness creates a different kind of control, not control over others, but control over interpretation. Instead of reacting to perceived imbalance, there is space to question it. Instead of assuming unfairness, there is room to observe the broader system. And instead of competing for immediate gain, there is the option to stabilize the environment that produces gain. This is not passive behavior, it is strategic awareness. Because in most social systems, those who understand the structure of cooperation hold more influence than those who compete within it. They are less predictable, less reactive, more stable. And stability in chaotic environments becomes a form of quiet power. The deeper truth is that peace is rarely sustained by equality alone. It is sustained by shared understanding. When individuals recognize that preserving the system is more valuable than maximizing personal advantage, cooperation becomes natural, not forced, not idealistic, just practical. And when this understanding is absent, even abundance can feel insufficient. Because the real conflict was never about the resource. It was about the way the mind chose to see it.